So, hello, I hope you're all well. This is my recorded lecture on how to write your reflective essay. I'm also going to be covering the portfolio as well. And these are for most of the filmmaking courses I teach. My students have to submit a portfolio of work and a reflective essay at the end of the module. Firstly, why? Why do I get you to do this work? Well, the portfolio and the reflective essay are both about helping you to develop reflective practice. It has been shown by a number of educational psychologists that the best way to learn and to get better at what we do is to reflect on our experiences of doing it. And so if you reflect on your practice of filmmaking, you will get better at it. And if you learn to reflect on it even outside of the university, you're going to get better at it all the time. This also can be applied to anything you do in life. So hopefully it's generally just going to make you better at learning outside of a university, getting good at stuff, and having a great life and making the world a better place, which is my plan for you all. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do is critical thinking. And I think I talk a lot about creative thinking and critical thinking going together. You can't do them at the same time, but they're both really important. And I think all of you are very creative. And I think all of you are good critical thinkers, but it's about learning to articulate and apply your critical thinking to your creativity as well. So critical thinking is about questioning things, not making assumptions, looking for things being evidence-based, so doing your research, not just taking what anyone tells you for granted, and always checking your sources of where information comes from. Okay, so the first thing you need to do in any assignment that you do is to read the brief fully and look at the assessment criteria. And in the assessment criteria, for both the portfolio and for the reflective essay, it pretty much leads you as to what you need to be doing. Because I'm looking at how, my assessment criteria will be, have you looked at the strengths and weaknesses of your own work? Or in the portfolio, have you researched the context of the film you're making and the work that you're making? So look at the assessment criteria, always, on whatever assignment you are doing at university. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is what I'm not looking for is I'm not looking for you to recite facts, to tell me about kind of very basic practical skills you've learned. I don't want you to give me a moment by moment account of what you did. This is not about proving that you made the film. I know you've made the film, or listing, the very basic things like booking rooms or casting sessions. That's all quite obvious to me, and that doesn't demonstrate your critical thinking. And I definitely don't want you to use either your portfolio or your reflective essay to tell me how terrible the rest of your team were. This is about you learning to reflect on your own work. You have to trust that through reading your work and through watching the film, if I understand your role, I will get a sense of the work you've done and be able to grade you fairly on that. If you feel that someone in your team has actually really hampered your work, then that's a matter for you to come and email me, or currently to email me or try and arrange a Skype session to discuss it. The reflective essay or the portfolio, it's not the place. What you are doing is reflecting on your work and your performance. Okay, so the portfolio and the reflective essay both relate to each other. And as I say, they both should demonstrate critical thinking, evaluation, analysis, and reflection, both on the research and preparation you did before you made the film and the process of making it and the final film itself. Yeah. So for the portfolio, I'm looking for all the research and reasoning that you did that goes behind the production. That was working towards the production. So a detailed account of your thoughts behind the production in terms of what were you setting out to achieve. I want you to demonstrate that you've considered relevant films and literature so that you'll understand the context that you're working in, and you've done some research. You've actually thought, okay, I'm making a film about this. I need to do some research on it. Okay, I'm making a film that's about a pandemic. What other pandemic films are out there? Why might people watch a film about a pandemic? Maybe there's someone who's written some academic papers about why people watch films that are about horrors or pandemics or things that kind of might happen, might not happen. We now know it has happened. I also want you to think about the history of filmmaking, the genre you're working in, and you're evidencing all the research and thinking you're doing around that. You need in your portfolio to indicate a clear indication of the plans you've made of the production process, stating your aims for the project and what your anticipated outcome is. The paperwork itself, that's all about demonstrating those things. So if you supply a shot list, that's about demonstrating this is how I'm going to shoot the film. This is my plan for the film. A storyboard's even better because I can go, okay, this is how they want the film to look. Yeah, this is what their plans were. Yeah, I think in your production portfolio, you should also present an awareness of any possible difficulties that you foresee happening. This is something you should do as a filmmaker anyway. So think about what difficulties might you come upon in your film. So, for example, you've written a film, it heavily stars a cat. Like, the cat's going to be an issue. Where are you going to find a cat that's going to perform? Is it going to cost? Are there budget implications? So present these and also present how you think you're going to overcome those problems. So you show that you're thinking ahead. It's also a good idea to think about audience. Who do you anticipate to be the audience of your film? How are you gearing your film towards that audience? Yeah. Okay. Take your audience into account. Okay. So that's the portfolio. For the reflective essay, I'm looking for evaluation, analysis, reflection on the whole project from start to finish, from how effective you were in your planning, your production, and then you're looking at the final film. So, and you're referencing your portfolio and you're saying, this is what I set out to do. This is what we did achieve. Where's the gap? Did you achieve what you wanted to? Did it work as well as you wanted to? What I want you to do is you detail specific weaknesses and be very specific about it in both the planning and the production itself and the film itself, and reflect on those weaknesses. How might you overcome those weaknesses in the future? And we're not talking, I don't want to know that this is not a list of excuses. Do you know what I mean? Everybody makes work that's flawed. I make work that's flawed, and I can tell you about that in a minute. But it's not saying, we found that all the batteries died on the equipment in the first day, or we got to the set and there was a faulty XLR cable, and what I've learned is I'll check my XLR cable next time. That's not the kind of stuff you're at university to learn. You're at university to learn how to really reflect on, okay, so I set out to, I'll use an example of my own filmmaking. I set out to make a film that was about kind of what it's like to be a teenage girl and have desire, but also be frightened of that desire at the same time. I don't think I quite achieved that. I don't think my actress looked quite young enough, and I also think I fudged it when I got the drama of my film and I chucked my central character off the boat rather than deal with the situation I'd created, yeah? That's critical reflection. That's much more about really looking at your work and thinking, okay, next time I've got to really try and work out how I develop drama once I've got my two characters into a difficult situation, yeah? You want it to be quite a high level, okay? I also want you to discuss the strengths of your project and reflect on how you can develop your strengths. If you feel you did really well at directing the actors, okay, how can you develop that further? What does that mean in terms of where your plans are for your filmmaking and for future projects. If you think the script was really written really well, how are you going to develop that skill that you've got? Every skill needs developing. Yeah. Okay. And you're noting all the lessons learned for future projects. As I say, not that you've got to check the kit before you bring it on the set, but lessons learned about storytelling and filmmaking that are kind of profound and reflective and philosophical. That's what you're here to do, Okay. You're not conveying information to me. You're not writing a report. You're not giving me a description of what happened. And you're not talking about simple problem solving. You are reflecting and analysing and evaluating, on your own work, okay? So to accompany this little lecture, there's a document I've written, which has got some links, but it's also got two people called Gibbs and Kolb. I've kind of developed a set of questions that are about developing your reflective practice. And you can apply this to anything you do. The more specific you can be about what it is you are reflecting on, the better. If I just say, okay, how was my directing? That's quite vague. And then I can just say, well, the film kind of looks all right and the actors are okay. I don't know if I'm going to actually improve my work from just saying, how was my directing? Whereas if you say, okay, how was my work with the actors? Or how was my mise en scene? How was my, getting the best out of the rest of my crew? And you specifically break down your role into the smaller elements of that role and reflect on those elements. You're going to end up with a really thorough reflective essay, but also you're going to improve your work in all those different areas, which is what you're here to do. Okay, so with the Gibbs and Kolb, the set of questions, basically you go through them and you start by describing what are you going to reflect on and being specific as possible. And then you talk about what your feelings were about that. How do I feel about how I directed the actors? How do I feel about the way the film looks or how it felt to be on set as a DOP, So you start with your reactions and your feelings. And I think that's about... it's about drawing on that kind of intuitive, instinctive stuff, which is the kind of creative unconscious part of the brain that you're then going to learn to kind of articulate and start examining. You then start evaluating what was good or bad about the experience or the film, or, how did I feel about, like you've said, how do I feel? What was good or bad about directing the actors? What worked well, what didn't work well, yeah? And you start making value judgments, and that's we've done description, feelings, and then evaluation, and then you move on to analysis. And this is the important bit, which, I think a lot of you are good at describing and talking about your feelings about things and even evaluating, but not so good at starting to analyze. How can you make sense of this situation? So, for example, when I'm gonna reflect on directing actors. I felt like it felt awkward, I felt uncomfortable, and I felt like I didn't get the performance I wanted. So my evaluation is that the experience wasn't good. It was I wasn't doing well and something was going wrong. How can I make sense of this situation? Okay, I'm going to go and read about directing actors. I maybe did a bit of research beforehand. Maybe I didn't do enough. That's one thing I've already learned. Maybe I'm going to read about directing actors or even look at what other directors have said about directing actors. And I'm going to try and look back at that lesson I did with Sam where we learn about result directing and start thinking about, well, did I do that? Did I result direct? Is that why it felt awkward and uncomfortable? Oh, yeah, I remember I actually told the actor how I wanted them to move and how I wanted their face to be. That's why it didn't work. That's why it didn't feel good, yeah? So it's about thinking, what was going on? Why didn't it feel good? Why didn't it work well, yeah? So that's the analysis. And then you go on to conclusions, yeah? So you've got your general conclusions. What can be concluded in a general sense? Actually, it isn't a good idea to show an actor with your face what you want them to be doing with their face. That's that's result directing. It's not going to go down well. You want to be telling them the context of how they're feeling, and then, so that's a general conclusion, and then a specific conclusion. I need to go and practice. with my directing in terms of finding ways of, giving better direction, so that's a kind of specific to me. This is something I need to specifically work on. I'm really good with the lighting and the image, but I need to look at my acting. And then you write, on the basis of that, a personal action plan. Yeah. So how am I going to do things differently? What steps am I going to take on the basis of what I've learned? So as I've said, I'm going to go forward. I'm going to start reading more books about directing actors. I'm going to start practicing. Actually, I might even set up a drama group or find some actors and get them to act and try out different ways of directing them in order to improve my directing. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff I am looking for in your reflective essay. In the document that accompanies this short lecture, there are some examples of student work. There's also some links if you want to know more about reflective practice and critical thinking. I hope this is useful. As always, you can contact me by email. Okay, over and out. Happy isolation.